Hey everyone, here we are again on a beautiful sunny day, and let's talk a bit about the ongoing discussions about the ceasefire. I know this is a topic that we've talked about before and you've probably heard a lot about. Um, if you notice, the Russian side says they're open to a ceasefire as long as the international community recognizes their occupation. Well, the way they put it, recognize that Crimea, so-called Donetsk People's Republic, Luhansk People's Republic, and Zaporizhia regions belong to them. They also say that they want to a ceasefire without preconditions. And these two statements are mutually exclusive, mutually contradictory, because if you want a ceasefire without preconditions and you're making preconditions that other countries need to recognize the legitimacy of your control over these oblasts, then these two statements just don't make sense, you know. Now, what this shows us is that Russia doesn't want peace. Again, I mean, not rocket science, not something we learned yesterday. We've known it for a while. And fortunately, it looks like even President Donald Trump is finally realizing that, yes, Putin has been pulling his leg. He's been stringing him along. What Trump says is he's been tapping me along. Really, I think what he means is he's been stringing me along. Well, in essence, basically, we're back to the realization that indeed Russia has just been playing this game. They don't want a ceasefire. They believe they're winning. They believe that the will of the West, so-called Western world, will collapse and that they can achieve their goals. They've also finally admitted to using North Korean troops. North Korea itself has admitted it, something we've known. They've denied it in the past, and now they've said, oh yeah, they thanked the heroic actions of the North Korean troops in Kursk Oblast. Um, so yeah, just the usual games from the Russian side. Them claiming that they're interested in a ceasefire, that they would like to have a ceasefire, and yet they wanna see the international community recognize their control over those oblasts, which they don't control. I mean, they do control most of Lugansk Oblast, but they don't control most of the other oblasts, especially Zaporizhia. They do control Crimea, which is Ukrainian. Uh, yeah, it's occupied by the Russians now, but of course Ukraine can never de jure accept Russian control over Crimea. Crimea is Ukrainian, but it is occupied right now. If the international community recognizes this as being Russian, this sets a very dangerous precedent for other areas and instills in us the idea, actually even normalizes the idea, that countries can redraw maps and borders by force. And if that is the case, then what's to stop North Korea trying to do the same, China trying to do the same? You get the picture. It opens, it stirs up a hornet's nest. It opens a can of worms, and it sets a very dangerous precedent. Because if countries and states can indeed redraw maps and borders by force, that means the rule of law no longer applies, which means that we're living in very dangerous times. And you'd better invest in your army, air force, navy, military forces. So we'll be moving away from relative peace that we've had over the past decades since the end of the Second World War, and we'll be entering a brave new world. I would argue that we've already entered it, thanks to this brutal war in Ukraine. So that's that. Good news that Zelensky seems to have helped Trump to open his eyes about what's going on, and it's extremely unlikely that Ukraine would recognize what is tantamount to capitulation, basically, in that recognizing Russian control over the annexed oblasts, with the ones which Russia occupied after destroying in many cases, destroying various cities, displacing people. They've also kidnapped children, which we'll talk about in the future. But yeah, the war goes on. Good news from the war in terms of deep strikes. Ukraine has destroyed a huge ammunition warehouse. So I would say that the war will go on for quite some time. I don't think there's any ceasefire in the pipeline in the near future. I think the two parties are too far away for there to be a ceasefire. I do think that Russians will continue to try to drag this ceasefire process, um, pretend that they wanted to have a ceasefire and yet continue the war every single day. Um, on the other hand, Ukrainians have an incentive in dragging out the mineral deal and not signing it because it's also a predatory deal and not in their interest. So we see both sides playing some kind of game there, but obviously, in terms of Russia's actions, I think it's pretty clear Putin does not want a ceasefire because he wants to continue the war, blame the Ukrainians for it, and seize more territory. If there were a ceasefire, there would be the risk of Ukraine getting closer to the EU or closer to NATO. Western countries could station troops in Ukraine. Western countries could supply Ukraine with more, Ukraine with more weapons, and then it would be harder for, obviously, Ukraine would also build defenses. All of this would make it harder for Russia to actually occupy more Ukrainian territory. So I think that from Russia's perspective, if they continue the war, that's in their favor. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Let me know what you think about it. Shout out to all my Ukrainian friends, students, and supporters of Ukraine. You are on the right side of history, and I'm sure that Ukraine will stop the modern day Nazis, modern day fascists, modern day Russists. So take care, stay safe, and glory to Ukraine.